And my name is Preston Clark, co-founder of Law Insider. All of you who are on are probably familiar. That's how you ended up on our mailing list. We appreciate all of you, your subscribership and your engagement with us. We are at a unique time in everything that's going on in our lives, and hearing that folks in Cape Town, South Africa are on lockdown and the restaurants are closed and there's food issues like this. We're in a unique global moment. And as lawyers, even globally, we share some commonalities and some challenges in how we manage our practice in a very, very unique time. And so the purpose of today's webinar is to bring together a very, very thoughtful group of lawyers who think about and navigate a remote practice already. And so I will mostly be in the background, but I wanted to kick us off. Mike Whalen from Lawyer Forward is going to be running point on the webinar today. We're going to be doing more webinars with Mike in the future. So by the way, if you want to hear on other topics and would like to continue engaging with us via webinar, please send recommendations and suggestions. This is just the beginning. But with that, thank you all for being here. We encourage questions. Mike, please take it away.
Hey, everybody, I'm Mike Whalen. I wrote a book called Lawyer Forward, Finding Your Place in the Future of Law, and I am here to help Preston help you guys figure out how to adjust to this craziness. We did just find out that our neighbors that way have all tested positive for COVID-19, so we're all going through and figuring out when was our last contact and freaking out a little bit. So these are super serious times, and in the middle of that, we've all still got to run a thing, right? We've got a practiced run, or we've got, we're in our own cases and trying to figure out how to move those people along. So what we wanted to do today was talk a bit about this, triage moment of jumping online, trying to get these very traditional practices that have often been hard to update and to modernize and jump them to being online. And then what we want to talk a bit about is the next thing. What happens after that? After you get online and your practice is going, how do you continue to update it so that it's more responsive to the need right now? So what we're going to do is I'm going to go around. First, I'm going to introduce everybody real quick with just the brief. We don't do long bios here. I like to tell jokes about people. Sorry, guys. But we're just going to do brief intros of why you should listen to each of these people. And as I ask you, as I share that, I'm going to ask each of you to share your top tip for working virtually. So first, Megan Xavier has been working virtually for your practices in California. Yes. You live in Atlanta, and as I recall, you even practiced from Australia for a while. Yeah. I did. So listen to Megan because she knows a lot about virtual practice. All right, what's your top tip, Megan?
So of course I couldn't follow instructions. I had to come up with two. Good. So my first one is to make sure that when you're working virtually from home all the time, that you get outside part of the day. I've worked remotely for years when I wasn't restricted from going outside. And the time you spend outside is incredibly important, even if it's just 5 minutes sitting in your driveway staring up at the sky. And my other one is, because this is different than normal working remotely. This is working remotely from home only with kids present. So my other tip is involve your team, and your team involves your entire family now. So don't think it's me versus them, that I have to wall myself off and they can't be involved or they have to stay away. Okay, it's not so great when they show up on your podcast, although it was kind of fun when that happened recently with Mike. But they can help a lot. And if you involve them in what you're doing, they can actually become really valuable members of your team and they're not your adversaries.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate that. All right, now we're going to talk to John. And John owns a firm called Counsel for Creators, which is in California. He's got this interesting perspective because he's dealing mostly with creatives and freelancers and people who are running their own businesses. So take it away, John.
Yeah, so I think number one tip would be connect with your colleagues, connect with your team every day. When we first started this, it was obviously hard. We weren't in the same space. We have an office. We're used to working remotely. But, after about a week, we realized, hey, I miss you guys, just have time to connect. It doesn't need to necessarily even be business. We can just talk about anything for 10 minutes, 15 minutes every morning, just so that you have that social connection with your team. I think that's really important, especially now.
Thank you, John. And finally, we have Lori Gonzales. Lori runs a virtual paralegal service. Is that the right way to phrase that? No, tell me.
Actually, we do medical record retrieval as the main focus, but we also do a lot of operations consulting. So we do boring admin work for lawyers. That's the best way to describe it. It's very sexy.
And what is your top tip? It better be sexy too.
Action over perfection. We have a little problem with perfectionism in the legal field, and as the only not a lawyer on this panel, I can say that one of the best things I've learned about working with my team remotely and employing a lot of technology is just choose something. It's action, right? Do something and don't wait for it to be perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Real quick, my tip, and then we'll get deeper into some of y'all's substantive subject matter expertise. So mine is to limit your daily to-do list to 3 things. I'm a big fan of the Kanban method, which is basically limit the number of things that you do, only do one at a time, and do it until it's done, right? So you've got this to-do, doing, done thing. That to-do list should just be a few things. And especially in this context, I'd be surprised if you got more than 3 good things done a day, but that's still a pretty good day. So try to restrict the list of things you're trying to get done. All right. So what I want to do now, guys, is kind of dig into y'all's experience and sort of the focus that has, that you have that's made you successful with working virtually. So Lori, I wanted to ask you about this idea of tech stacks, of what lawyers should do to combine tools that work as opposed to looking for the perfect tool. Talk to us about tech stacks and maybe some crucial tools if you're practicing or working virtually.
So I think a lot of times everybody wants an all-in-one, right? We wish everything was just in one spot, and that's a natural way to react, especially when we're overwhelmed. But a lot of tools I think aren't necessarily built for their kind of add-ons. So for me, and this is just personal, I'm not a Microsoft Teams person. Love Outlook 365. Love Office 365, but I'm just not into the whole Teams and all the amazing other tools they built. For me, it's a preference. So my tech stack is really about me finding the right tools that fit my need and my team's need. Probably more importantly, that it fits my team's need. So if you aren't working alone, if you have a team, it's really important to think about not necessarily what you need, but what they need in order to communicate and do their job very well, especially if you're the boss. So tech stack is really about piecing together what works, especially I think in a situation where we are now, where people might be moving very quickly from, traditional tools. One of my favorite questions running around the legal space right now is how the heck do I mail something, right? Suddenly we don't have a way to mail a document. And that's actually something we haven't done at Rainicorp Corp for 4 or 5 years. We do not physically mail anything unless it requires a wet signature. And so finding those kind of tools that will work with you, by the way, that's case mail in case anyone got really excited about that. Finding tools that can meet all of your needs might mean not looking for that perfect integration or trying too hard to fit into a tool that doesn't fit how your team works. So tech stack, just stack it on top of each other until you get the right pieces working.
Thank you, Lori. And I wanted to share real quick an article that I saw yesterday in the chat there. It's from MIT, and the argument that they're making is similar that Lori's making, and it's based in research. It's this idea that if you have bad communication policies and you put those on top of shiny tech, you're just going to have faster bad communication, right? It's just going to be virtual and disaggregated and still stupid. So check out that article. It'll give you some research-based tips for dealing with communication strategy. All right, Megan, one of the things that I keep seeing coming up with lawyers is this concern that if I've got a disaggregated team, how do I supervise them? And as lawyers, we have to supervise the people who are doing work for us. There's also concerns about, data integrity and confidentiality. You deal with ethics with attorneys a lot. Any tips or ideas on how to manage some of those ethical concerns?
Well, the first tip is simply to kind of calm down about it, that most of the concerns are completely manageable. And we don't actually have ethics rules that preclude us from working in remote teams. And that's actually a basic premise that I think some lawyers operate on sometimes is that, oh, I know I have to be in the office overseeing everyone, like looking over their shoulder. You don't. You have to be in contact. You have to know what's going on. You should, whether they're working from home or working at the desk next to you. If you have a well-run team and a team with good relationships and communication, this really should not be a huge issue. But that's a pretty big assumption, right? Not all of us have such well-oiled machines in our offices. And sometimes the Band-Aid of being able to look over their physical shoulder is how you keep it together. So now as you transition into a virtual team, you have to take the relationships as they currently stand and translate them into this remote environment. So it's going to look different for everyone. For some people, it might mean that you are literally having them send you everything they're about to send out before they send it. And that's the level of supervision required. For others, it's going to be empowering them to do more than maybe they used to be able to do because you can trust them and now they're in a different environment. It may be CCing you on every single email they send because you need to keep more tabs on them. So you have to build the level of supervision you need into these remote work environments. It can get really ugly and you might find that relationships start to fall apart. Those are probably relationships that were going to fall apart one way or the other. And so I would say that stimulus bill issues aside, you may not be laying anybody off right now. You have to recognize that some of these relationships aren't going to survive this shutdown. And this is a really good time to test what you can fix in those relationships. I really think that remote teams work best when you have some means of communication that you are all on board with, such as you're all on Slack and you check in there all day long. And maybe you don't instantly respond to every message, but everyone knows that's your central hub. Having something like that, a platform like that for instant communication, really substitutes well in the remote environment for the walk down the hall and grab somebody's attention. So that would be my number one when it comes to supervising, is make sure you're on a shared platform. And as far as confidentiality, obviously that's a huge issue, right? And even we were talking before we started today about Zoom and Zoom bombing. You do have to take some basic precautions. You can't just go, well, we're remote now, throw caution to the wind. It's like having a, attorney-client confidential communication sitting in a Starbucks with people whizzing by. No, you can't do that. So you do have to look at your tools and take some reasonable precautions. But remember that the ethics opinions and guidelines that we have out there on using technology do not say you have to 100% secure everything every time, on penalty of death. They say take reasonable precautions. You want to have attorney-client confidential communications over Zoom, make it an invite-only meeting room. Basic premise. Put a password on it, just the same as you would if we weren't all working remotely. Hopefully these were things that crossed your mind before. These are just highlighted now. Nothing's actually changed in that regard.
Yeah, and a lot of these, technical competency requirements are being interpreted by 80-year-old Supreme Court justices. So
yes.
the reasonable man standard starts to get really loose when you're talking about technological competence in this situation. But it sounds like if you can at least document, I'm taking these precautions and they're, rational, that it's a defensible position anyway.
Yeah, and someone just commented on the webinar chat about encryption on Zoom being faulty. We don't actually have to be encrypted all the time. I mean, I get what you're saying, that that's definitely an issue that they're dealing with, but we send emails and they're usually not encrypted. Right? Most lawyers are not using encrypted email all the time. That does not make our emails discoverable. So using reasonable precautions is the standard. So just keep that in mind.
In the middle of this, none of my kids have broken in, but my dog is barking in the backyard because it's 2020 and the apocalypse. Okay. It's all okay, guys. So John, I wanted to talk to you because you and I have talked about this a little bit. When we're in this situation, a lot of the ways that we serve clients aren't even available right now, right? Traditionally, if we were to go to a court or we were to have a meeting in our office, a lot of these things we just cannot do right now. How do you think about, when you're dealing with your clients, how to sort of design a way to deliver products that doesn't require you being in a space? How do you like to think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about what it is that I'm trying to offer. And one of the things with our firm from the get-go is we've been pretty much remote, like I think a lot of people are. And it's going to depend upon your practice area. So we don't go to court, so there's a lot that we can do remotely. I think it's going to vary from practice to practice. If you're an attorney who does go to court or who does meet with your clients in person, you'll need to find a substitute. I mean, it's not satisfactory. People would probably prefer to meet with you and know you if they're going through a divorce or some other sort of difficult time. They're going to want to see you in person. Unfortunately, that's not available. So I think it's just how do you make yourself most available? How do you kind of replicate that relationship, that availability, and to a certain extent, the empathy that you would have from an in-person meeting? And so I think for some attorneys, if that's new to you, it's just a matter of trying what works. It matters to try something that works for you, in essence, something you're comfortable with. So if you're uncomfortable with Zoom, if you're uncomfortable being on video, it might mean a phone call. It might mean recorded content. So there's a lot of different ways that you can present yourself using technology now. And I think people have to experiment and see what's going to work for them. And it's going to be a combination as well. So it's not to say that one is going to be the answer, sort of like Lori was saying, you kind of stack these things together. So it might be more frequent emails to your clients and customers, letting them know that, hey, I'm still here. I'm open for phone calls, making it easy for people to connect with you and make appointments with you. I think all of those things hold true in a normal time, and they're especially true and especially important now when people must use technology, must sort of operate at a distance.
Great. And I would just remind all of you guys who are watching to make sure to share any questions in the chat. And Preston is watching out for that. We're going to cover those in a minute. But if I can summarize, it sounds like what we're saying, just to put together what we've said, you've got to do some service design, walk through the experience of your client, walk through the experience of your staff, walk through your own experience, and then take some reasonable precautions with the tools you're using and piece together what works for your situation, thinking ahead. It sounds like there's just a lot of thinking to do right now before we just toss our traditional practices online. But a lot of people are just in the weeds of that right now and trying to get those technical things. Lori had shared with us a cool resource sheet. We're going to make sure that people get that for different tools to add on. And certainly there's a lot of talk around it. What I want to talk about now, if you guys are up for it, is sort of what's next, right? I've seen a lot of, frankly, opportunism where these people selling things are like, this is the opportunity you were always waiting for to fix whatever, like, yay, pandemic. It's ridiculous. But anyway, whether it's a good opportunity or it's just a situation that's forcing us into some change, there's a question about what's after this, right? Are we going to keep doing traditional practices and practice models, but online? Or is this an opportunity to try to think through something different? I'd love to get you guys' take on that. Do you think things are going to fundamentally change, good or bad? What can we do to try to stumble through this well? And anybody can jump in on that.
I think I'll go. I've spent the last almost year and a half on a task force in California with their Supreme Court and their state bar, talking about how to innovate legal services and the delivery of legal services as it relates to access to justice. And I think one of the things that you learn when you're surrounded by that discussion constantly is how much opportunity there is. The data says, and it's very clear and it's pretty widely accepted globally, that 80 to 86% of legal needs are unmet. Holy cow, we don't even have to do a great job of meeting those unmet needs to like quadruple the opportunities that exist. So for me personally, I hope we are using this opportunity to really think through how we can meet all of those needs. And those needs are not unmet because people can't afford legal services. It's because we're not giving them what they need in a way they need it. So for me, I'm really hoping this is just a further push of change. I think we've been slowly working towards that, and maybe this speeds it up for us. But I hope everybody's excited about obviously it's a pandemic and we're freaked out, and I've done my cry in the corner several times. So I don't want to minimize the fear or the stress that comes with this. But there's a lot of opportunity to try something new and really look at meeting a whole bunch of needs that are just laying around waiting for you.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. I would just say, to your question of whether we're going to go back to traditional practice, I think a lot of this depends on how long it lasts that we're cooped up at home. I think that if this only lasted a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like they originally said, can't say I ever believed that, but that's what they were originally telling us. I think it would just be people kind of bursting to get out and get back to the office and go back to normal methods. But the longer this lasts, the more the innovation is required and the more ingrained some of it will become. And you'll notice even over these last few weeks, hasn't everybody gotten way more comfortable on video than they were before? Yeah. This is now to think. My husband is in the office, in person. I have to work in the city. I can't even work in the satellite office. I have to be there kind of guy. He is at his desk on Zoom on partner meetings with all these partners, and he's laughing at some of their tech incompetence now. And I just go, yeah, well, how about you last week?
Yeah.
But everyone's evolving so fast that if we stay in this shutdown long enough, I think some of the new business models and new ways of doing business will take hold enough so that we will actually want to continue. Both the lawyers will want to continue working that way, and the clients will be much more comfortable accepting their services that way, or even wanting the services delivered that way. So I think a big contingent of us may continue in this sort of remote environment.
Yeah, and I don't know, but I think I initially worked virtually out of necessity because I started a solo firm right out of law school and just couldn't afford an office. And I think, Megan, because of your family moving around, you've had to, but now even when I could go choose to have an office and be in a drive downtown and all that stuff, I don't think I'd go back to it.
You couldn't pay me.
Yeah. Good call.
I actually miss my office. So I think I will, for all of you listening who are like, now hold on a minute. I like the blended, right? So I had to put up this fancy poster really low on the wall, so y'all had something interesting to look at behind me. But my office is way better than this. Than this little corner.
You like people more than we do.
I do like people. So I love the idea that you get to pick and choose, though. What I do think will happen for those who decide they really love offices is I'm actually so much calmer working at home, and my whole team is remote. So I do have an office, and I also have a remote team. And I'm really looking forward to choosing to stay home and hopping on a quick call if there's an emergency and taking a Thursday off. Maybe Thursdays or Saturdays now. That sounds really interesting and fun.
What about you, John? What do you think is going to come in the future of this?
Yeah, I think a lot of what's going to be nice is a lot of lawyers might question some of the basic assumptions of what clients want. So I think perhaps a lot of people assume clients want to meet in person, they want to drive downtown, they want to see your office and shake your hand. That might be true, and that's definitely true in some situations, but I think people are going to learn that clients are more flexible than we might often give them credit for. And what I mean by that is a lot of clients, they might not say it, but they're like, I don't want to drive downtown and come and sign a check in person and wait in your waiting room and see your office. I don't care. I just want my legal needs met. And so I think when people actually take this jump because they're forced to like, hey, we're going to do our initial consultation over Zoom, they're going to see clients are totally fine with that. And that's the way we've been operating. We haven't met 95% of our clients, but we always have that as an option. And so I think a lot of attorneys are going to see, oh, wait, I can do it like this. This is not, people aren't going to run away. They're not going to be afraid if they don't see my name in gold letters physically, that they're still going to hire me. Yeah, they are. And I think a lot of attorneys are going to see that. And I think also we're going to learn more about, sort of why we even have offices. I mean, it's kind of like this weird statement, I get it, but is it to enable collaboration? Is it because we like the environment and it helps us produce better? Or is it just force of habit? Are we just doing it because, well, I go to work, so therefore I have an office? If that's the reason, I think that's something we can question and sort of see what's going to work better for me, what's going to work better for my team, what's going to work better for the clients, what's the right combination. People will adjust that combination between virtual and physical presence.
I think what I'm learning is the main reason I like going to an office is because my kids are annoying. And that was important to learn. Well, and I know, from what you were saying, John, I've been thinking about this a lot. Depending on who you serve in your firm, a lot of legal buyers are not experienced legal buyers. And so for them, their expectations are coming from some combo of Law and Order and Amazon, right? So we're really setting the expectations about what it means to hire a lawyer for a lot of people. And so it's almost like we're imposing this weird Law and Order, fancy books behind us kind of thing. So it is interesting to see that pivot. I had a couple of questions for you guys about working from home, especially dealing with my annoying kids. But before we get to that, sorry, Megan, you have a finger
can I jump in
raised.
before you do? Before you move on, I'm noticing some of the comments in our webinar chat, and one theme is that there's a lot of creativity and relationships that are happening in a real office. Well, I came out of Big Law. I was in Big Law for about 10 years. And then I moved to working remotely for the same firm. That was my first virtual experience. And I got to tell you, I was painfully lonely because we used to walk down the hall and just get into some esoteric conversation, about law practice or some word in a contract. And I loved that. I really thrived on that interaction. When I was suddenly completely alone, I found that really difficult. And then I launched my solo practice and continued to be lonely until I got out, which I know we can't do right now, and physically met a group of lawyers, and this was through Lawyerist, who they all had similar ideas to mine, and all my crazy thoughts were suddenly not crazy because I was surrounded by people who were similarly minded. And I found that there was this real world of people out there that could sort of replace what I used to have in the office. Now, I don't live near any of them. I never see them. But knowing they were out there and then connecting with them through virtual means really satisfied that piece of me. So I'd urge you, if you're finding it really lonesome, suddenly being at home, it doesn't necessarily mean you only connect with your team members in order to find some interaction with other people. There's really interesting groups of people online that you can start to connect with that can sort of solve that problem.
Yeah, you guys go follow us all on Twitter. It's cheaper than therapy, Twitter is, so you should be there. Yeah, I was reading an article from the New York Times the other day that was talking about the depression and the anxiety that we're likely to see increase at this time. And this psychologist pointed out that a lot of the interventions for these mental health issues are social, right? They'll put you in a group, they'll put you in like a group therapy thing, or they'll talk about how to connect with family and friends. And so the psychologist was pointing out, we have this vicious feedback loop of we're already anxious and at risk for depression, and then we don't have those balancing relationships. So definitely, I think Megan's point is well taken, that if in this moment, if you don't have those relationships handed to you the way you sort of do with work, those are people you have to interact with, you're going to have to proactively build some relationships, however you do that. So, but seriously, follow us on Twitter because we're all pretty funny and smart.
And Lori? I want to throw out, I've been on this legal tech circuit for the past few years, and that is where I find my people. So I live in a small town, not too small, but my people are not hanging out in my community. And so the idea that I was suddenly stuck in my house and in my community, and I wasn't going to see all of my legal tech amazing friends, who are on this webinar, I got a little panicky. And so I encourage you, I know it feels like because we don't have that ability to go out and network in the way we're used to, I've done a few things to deal with that. One is Yahtzee Zoom dates. So we're playing Yahtzee on Zoom as a group, some of us. And so I encourage you to think, there's some really cool games out there that are built and designed for Zoom right now, so you can create those moments. I've seen a ton of pop-up happy hours and coffee dates, so those who don't want to partake in a happy hour, but you also have a chance to build the community. When all of this kind of went down, I reached out on Twitter to the legal tech community and said, hey guys, I'm like feeling alone and I need to build something and do something. And less than a week later, there are 170 people all working on a cool volunteer project together in Slack. So I think that you can also create the community you're looking for by being willing to kind of think outside the box and reach outside of your norm, and do that on social media. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm looking to build this community. Who's in? Because everybody's looking for the same thing, I think, right now. And that is a way to connect while we're not able to see each other in person.
I love that. Thank you, guys. I always say the one thing consistent about your practice is you. So definitely build around a system that works for you. Preston, I saw a bunch of questions popping up. I wonder if we could get to those and put some of these questions to our experts from your community here.
Yeah, there's some great questions. So one that I think is really interesting to me, because I think about it a lot personally in my own business and would love to hear perspective on, is performance management in the remote environment. And I think we've touched on it a little bit, but the idea of when there's butts in seats, as we say, and when someone's clocking in and clocking out, you may not be as sensitive to productivity. You're just like, well, she was there today. I don't know. When suddenly you don't get to see anybody, tips, best practices, strategies from a performance management perspective when managing a remote team. I know that's we could do 3 webinars just on that, but would love to get some takes on that.
Ironically, I've found it easier. The more that we're remote, it's actually easier for me to sort of stay on top of productivity, because I'm not looking at sort of, what's the best way to put this, sort of proxy metrics as what time did someone come to the office, what time did they leave? I'm looking at what projects did they complete, what's done. And, when we do our weekly meeting, if something's not done, it's really apparent to everybody. Whereas, I think in a lot of times in physical environments, you can kind of fake your way through it. You can look like you're busy, look like you're working hard, but the productivity is not there. Now, when you take that away, that sort of, I want to call it productivity theater, is gone, and you're really held more accountable.
Yeah, I want to kind of throw out too. So if you're managing your tasks, however you do that, if you are effectively managing a team, you have a way to identify tasks as they're completed. And this may be your case management software, it may be project management software. And so really it becomes a focus away from, I think John hit the nail on the head of, how long are they working? And I really want to encourage anyone listening to this to rethink how hours worked equals productivity for us in the legal field. My team decided in January we would cut everyone's hours by 10 hours a week, but continue to pay them for 40. And I'll share that my team got more productive with 10 hours less each. And we saw an immediate increase in the completion of the work that needed to be done. And some of it was because they got their life back, right? Like they had time to de-stress. We didn't spend 2 hours a day disturbing each other in the office because we were all too tired or not really feeling up to working anyway. And so especially during a time like this, but I would encourage you to really go back and think about how can your entire team know what the status of a project or a matter or a file is at any one time. And if that's not accessible remotely to your entire team, that's a great place to start to really focus then on how you manage the people who are doing those tasks.
That's great. There's a really good book on that if you're ever bored called Counterproductive that's about separating this idea of time and productivity. It's really interesting.
There's a lot of questions that I think touch on a similar vein of isolation, loneliness, engagement, productivity. I know we talked a little bit, someone mentioned Slack, which I think is great. But obviously finding ways to socialize on Zoom, as Lori was suggesting, I think is awesome. But how else, maybe from a calendar management perspective or from a meeting management or check-in, not just on a performance basis, but more from an engagement, what are you all doing or strategies that you have so that people feel connected while working?
Well, I'll share as far as when you said calendar management, I kind of perked up. I have a standing call with my virtual assistant every week. And I kind of hate the phone, and so does she. And so we both are kind of inclined every week to be like, could we just push this? Could we just cancel this? Like, we don't really need to talk, do we? But we don't do that. And we've actually talked about this openly. And she and I have both been virtual since the beginning. So this isn't new for us with this pandemic. But we insist on having that call because there's something about hearing each other's voices and going over where we are with work that will push each other to get those tasks that are falling in the dead task pile done. And we just feel connected, and we spend part of that time just visiting. She lives in an RV and is constantly traveling, which is real interesting in this pandemic, I'll tell you. But she's always got stories of their latest place they went or something cool that happened, and they don't have kids. So I talk about mine, and she always enjoys that. And, you know, we have this kind of banter, and that connection is just super important. So putting times like that on your calendar and then treating them as just immovable despite your mood, I think is a really important thing, especially when we're all feeling a little lonely and we might have a tendency to withdraw further when it's actually the wrong thing for us to do emotionally.
There was a question on there focused on tools about project management. I can get nerdy about this all day. I really like a tool called Monday.com. It uses a Gantt chart methodology, which is sort of like seeing all these projects over time, right? So you've got, because with lawyers, we're very focused on how long, like what filing deadlines and whatever, if that's your kind of practice. But for you guys, a lot of you, it might not be. My preferred tool for collaboration is Asana. It's got a really great way to assign pieces of things without giving somebody the whole thing, which is harder with other tools. I really like that one. In both cases, their data is pretty well controlled, so I had never felt worried about sending legal data, but definitely, and really, as you can tell by my Post-it notes behind me, I'm a big fan of the Post-it note. It is my favorite legal tech tool, and it's really that visual of being able to move a project along, and that feel good that you get as you move a project. It's more difficult to coordinate with, but Post-it actually has an app. There's a Post-it notes app that you can turn around and take a picture of your Post-it notes, and it will turn them into virtual cards. It's hilarious and awesome. And my kids love it.
Mike, that was Post-it, you said? Post-it?
Yeah, the Post-it company has their own app. Yep.
That is so cool. I never knew that.
I think on this, I'm going to go kind of build off what Megan was talking about in terms of calendaring check-ins. And I'll share, if your team is newly remote, you might consider daily check-ins for a few weeks that are just 15 minutes, and maybe even a standing coffee chat time. So we have a standing coffee chat time at Raina Corp right now. It's 10 to 10:30. You can show up. If you're too busy, you do not have to show up. So we've left it open, but it's our virtual water cooler moment. It's how we're finding time to just catch up on each other. Because if we were in the same place, we would definitely find more time. And while half of our team has always been remote, and then we have a small team, the other half has been in an office, you know, we would check in on chickens. One of my team has chickens, and they're really important to him. So checking in on the chicken girls and seeing how they're laying eggs and seeing if I need some. And it's just given us a chance to really connect. And then we have those weekly meetings that are more intense about the work. So we've separated those a little bit for ourselves, just to keep us on track and also to give us. So I think this is a great group here to consider building a coffee chat as a group, right? You already are a community, and maybe you guys can come up with a once a week coffee chat time that's optional and available. And it's a great way to sort of fight some of that loneliness. And there are connections made out of that then turn into even better opportunities to connect.
Yeah, Lori, I just want to add to that this idea is actually so powerful that one of my children is 8, and his class ranges from ages 6 to 9. And the teacher set up a Zoom, and she's got certain times of the week where you can come and just socialize. Like, she explicitly said, this is not for learning. This is not for lessons. These kids miss their community. They miss each other. They are not accustomed to this. You think old 60-year-old dudes who've never worked remotely are struggling? So are the kids.
Yes.
And it's incredibly well attended, and the kids get on there and they're tucking their Pokemon cards, and I fell playing football in my backyard yesterday. and they come out with their buckets filled. They feel so much better. So just want to say it applies to everybody.
I had this strange meeting with my kids where I sat them down and I was like, you guys have to find time to play on Facebook or on Xbox Live, right? You've got to play Xbox with your friends.
You forced them.
Their faces were like, what? Who are you? I was like, no, you will yell at the TV with your friends or else, because you got to find that time.
And I see we have a 60-year-old dude.
60-year-old dudes play Xbox, okay?
Yeah. No, because of course that's what I said. And my dad's a 75-year-old one who's like, I'm trying to get him on family Zoom. He lives 5 minutes away and I don't want him to come over. I'm like, Dad, get on Zoom with us, please. I'm glad you're here, Blake.
Hey, there's a cool one for, I know we have a lot of in-house attorneys on, so I think this is a good one. So for those that are billing hours, the idea of call time is good because it means we're making more money. But in this case, it was internal clients are addicted to long calls and long meetings. Some advice to give them confidence working remotely when they may not be used to doing that.
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
So are you asking how to make the meeting shorter when dealing with other people?
Yeah, and Carla, if you want to clarify in the chat, you can. Or excuse me, Natalia, do you have some tips specifically for in-house? Internal clients are addicted to long calls and long meetings. So I assume that's the expectation. Lots of coming into your office, sitting down, chatting. The best way to engage internal clients and to maintain a working relationship, though now in a remote environment. Maybe the answer is Slack and these other tools, but I think it's a good question.
Yeah, Megan, you might have worked in the largest company environment. And I can't imagine as an associate, you had a ton of control over lawyers blabbing on for hours, but any tips on how to deal with these long meetings and sort of try to figure out how to keep them focused?
Well, it's funny. I have more of the clients now who are accustomed to just being able to talk and talk and talk. And in the big firms, you're right, I had no control whatsoever. I was just sitting there pulling my hair out. But now what I'm finding is that we are all balancing so many roles that we used to be able to compartmentalize a lot better. Like I'm sort of fond of saying right now, I've always worked from home. It just usually was an empty house when I was working. I didn't work when everybody was here. And now I'm trying to juggle it all. And Mike, you've made the point that now that we're home with everyone, we really can't expect 8 to 10 hours of productivity a day. So what I'm finding is most effective with people who are accustomed to having really long meetings is to say, look, we're all super busy. I know we have a lot to do. I'm just going to grab 15 minutes of your time. Okay. And I promise hard stop at 15. And you kind of say that at the outset, acknowledging where everybody is. Like after 15, somebody's child is going to be pulling on them. Okay, somebody's going to end up the senator who said to the Democratic caucus, honey, go potty and I'll come help you in a minute. Okay, so if you just kind of put that at the outset, like, hey, this is really short because we're all in this same boat, I think it might have some impact.
Yeah, and I think I've found, and you guys can tell me if this is crazy, but we used to kind of take a lot of people are taking these artifacts of we were in an office and just virtualizing them. They're not really changing stuff. And so you've really got to have a feedback system where you can transparently to the other people say, look, for me to do my job right now, and this may be as simple as a nicely worded email, for me to do my job right now, these things are making it really difficult for me to be productive. Here's my productive window. And a lot of times, especially when you're dealing with bosses, give them an alternative. Tell them, which do you want me to prioritize? So I'm going to give you the things that I've got to choose from. And you, boss, don't recognize that I'm choosing right now, right? You're making me choose. Let me put you in the position where you can choose. You tell me, do you want me to prioritize this meeting or do you want me to get done with this research? Where do you want my time to be spent? But that transparency, because we're all figuring this out, right? Your bosses are figuring this out. They're asking the same questions we're asking about how to manage staff right now. Be open and communicate with them, or none of us are going to get through this.
And maybe, oh, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say it's about transparency and setting expectation. So, and there's even software tools we can use like Calendly or Acuity or something like that to set up meeting slots. So it can be 15 minutes, it can be half an hour, so that no meeting is open-ended. It should always be we're talking from 1:30 to 2. That's what it is. That's what we're budgeting for. Time is basically the same as money, so we should budget it that way.
John totally stole my thought, so
I knew it. I knew I was going to do that.
He said, I think this is that perfect opportunity for you to change some of those long, drawn-out meetings. And will they go over? Sure, they will. But there's a sense of when I know a meeting is only 45 minutes long, that's a common thing I think that happens on the legal tech side. Everybody calendars 45-minute meetings instead of an hour. Man, you always get done in an hour. It's amazing what that 45-minute, we still go over, but it's done in an hour. So yes, giving them, and make it something where you send out the invite. So if you're not the person in power, as the person who's rarely been in power in the legal space, for my own career, I am very helpful. So, hey, you wanted to meet? I'm going to go ahead and send you a quick invite and a Zoom link or whatever method of video conferencing you might want to use. And that gives you the power to set the time and kind of put it in their head beforehand that this doesn't need to last forever.
And one other thing would be to encourage people, if they can send an email instead of convening a meeting, go that route.
Yeah, that meme has gone around nonstop. That's like, what this has proven is that meeting could have, in fact, been an email.
Okay, see, I hadn't even seen that, but same on, that's the idea. I mean, if you say, look, everyone's schedules are all jumbled, right? We were in an office, everybody 8 to 5. Now I'm in from 8 to 9:30 and I'm back at 11 and I'm here, it's really hard. And so if you could, email that instead. Yeah.
And I can't stress enough alternative forms of communication, right? Like we've got to not use email either. So that meme terrifies me when I see that, because the last thing I want today is more email. I get plenty of that. Any way you can find to communicate outside of those traditional means. We use Slack so much in my team, and we even use it to tell each other when we're around. So we built out some great new statuses that include, I'm on lunch, don't ask. We have one that says don't ask. And the whole point of that is I'm dealing with life and I don't want to have to tell you what I'm doing, but I'm not available. And so just this idea of and that also makes us feel connected, right? Where we understand what each other is doing, even when they're not available to us. And so kind of changing how we communicate.
Preston, any other questions you wanted to get through?
Yeah, these questions are so interesting. So there's a theme of haven't we always been working remotely, which is sort of the we are knowledge workers, at least in part. And so some of this is we've been autonomous, but certainly the connectivity piece, it was something that was default before, and now we have to be more intentional about. I think this is an interesting one. There was a couple previous comments about what's going to happen with the court system, and I think that's probably a Pandora's box of a discussion. And we probably don't know unless someone does, in which case, by all means. But this comment, I think the next webinar should be how to do lawyering in a semi-closed world. And then Natesh's comment about how you source information, how you conduct research, how you stay up on your game. You used to be able to walk down the hall, or you used to be able to walk to the library. I don't know if there's a specific question in there as much as how do we think our practices will change as a result if there is a new normal, if for the next 6 months it is not business as usual, and maybe that's a compound question of what do we think about new research vehicles or tools, and do we need to be expanding our practice areas because some things that were lucrative before are going to dry up. So that's a lot. But I think that these are really interesting comments and questions.
I want to give a shameless plug real quick. Preston and I have been working on this piece around modern knowledge workers, right? Like this idea of how in this context, time was the definition of lawyering was I've got a bunch of books, right? Like it was all monopolized. It was based on scarcity. that's just not the world anymore, right? The network is now smarter than any one of us. And so this piece is long. There's a lot to it about trying to get through how to modernize a knowledge job. So I would definitely look out for that. In general, the principle that I would sort of, that's really hard for lawyers to get a hold of is that knowing everything all the time is not really our function anymore. It's sort of impossible. There's a really good book called Too Big to Know by David Weinberger about this, but it's just that being an expert right now, it's almost like being a change agent more than anything, right? Like you're just leading people through decisions. And so anyway, look out for the piece that will come from Law Insider soon. Anybody else had any thoughts on that?
I'm actually finding, so a lot of the lawyers I know who are really struggling with this. I have lawyer friends in Atlanta who only do DUIs, and guess what's not happening very much right now in Atlanta is DUIs. And my business deals primarily in record retrieval for personal injury lawyers, and guess who's not going to be getting in car accidents in 3 to 4 months, right? I'm in Tennessee, so we're still driving crazy for at least a little while. But the reality is, I think that the people I see who are pivoting the best right now in the legal space, and that's both lawyers and anyone who serves lawyers, are those who are really taking this opportunity to just reach out and offer help, right? There's no real way to understand how this is going to change what we're doing and what we should be doing. But helping and listening is a way for us to really get behind the scenes and understand what comes next. So I would encourage you to think about what you can do in your community. A Nashville lawyer who only did criminal law reached out to our whole community and offered estate planning documents, very simple estate planning documents, not her forte, but she can do those simple ones because of all of the fears around COVID, and has now found this brand new set of clients who are looking to her for all these other things because she was there when they needed her for this one thing. And now she's working in some business law and some corporate, looking at contracts and other things, and found a whole new set of clients just from offering a little bit of assistance while she had some downtime.
Yeah, John and I were talking about this earlier. We have a tendency to, as lawyers, think that we can just switch practice areas real quick. And certainly we've got the base education to be able to do that. But I think carefully about it because there's a lot of switching costs to being able to do another practice area competently. It's possible that you can find other ways to deliver your knowledge, right? You still have the expertise and the context and your personal skills. Can you do some other way to deliver it? If it's a content product or bundled hours or some ways, the fancy word is productizing, how to turn your knowledge into other kinds of products. This legal services thing is just one, it's a way to productize that was handed to us. Doesn't mean it's the only way to meet that demand. So I might consider that in addition to maybe switching practice areas. Preston, any other stuff jumping?
Well, I think can we do? I think we've talked a lot about tools, but can we throw out a few more? Because the question about e-sign came up. I know we talked about Notion. We talked about Monday. Any other just tools? I want people to hear what the tools are because I think some of them are very familiar to us and just may not be to others. So any tools that you use in your practice on a daily basis, whether it's project management or engagement, I'd love to make sure everyone hears those.
I'll go ahead. A couple that I think maybe a lot of people already know, but if they don't already know, are two sort of categories. Number one would be appointment scheduling. So those are pieces of software like Acuity scheduling or Calendly, especially if you're trying to manage your time like around family obligations and work obligations. This is a way that someone can pick a time on your calendar and say, hey, I want to talk to you at 1 p.m. and they can get on your calendar. So you don't have to do the whole thing where you go back and forth and try to find time. You can sort of budget your time, you can manage your time. So that's one way. Another thing, if you haven't looked into it, are applications that allow you to build forms. So as you're beginning to work remotely, people want to get information to you. And this might be information that before maybe you had someone at your office writing it down or doing some sort of intake. You can actually build your own form. So you'd use FormStack or Typeform or something like that to collect information remotely. You can even collect payments. So that's nice too. And maybe we could even talk about different online payments. So a lot of attorneys, if you are still accepting checks or cash, I guess, you can use credit cards. You can accept credit cards. You can accept electronic transfers online. Definitely a good thing to look at so that you can still get paid.
Yeah, and you definitely have to contextualize this because this is an international audience. Check what works with your banks in your area, because different, obviously, countries have different regulations for online payments. Any other tools that you guys wanted to recommend?
So Mike, you had mentioned Kanban as a method for organizing your thoughts and your to-do list. A lot of people use an app called Trello for that. I use one called Kanban Tool. What I love, I've never really used Trello, so I can't speak to it, but within Kanban Tool, my assistant and I can assign each other certain tasks. So we might have a card that has 15 things that have to get done to make that card complete. And she can tell me, which ones I have to do. And then I get reminded to do them. So that's one of my favorites, and certainly a major part of our practice.
And I'll kind of throw out my range of tools because I think we have a lot. We use 2 different case management softwares. So if you, this may not fit for everyone here, but we use Clio and FileVine, 2 very different case management systems for very different things. We are always looking at document automation and form documents as well. So we've been playing around with something called Documate and Community Lawyer. Both allow you, there's some interesting tools and things happening in there where people are sharing their documents that they're producing in a new way to deliver. So they're actually sharing them in the communities. So both Community Lawyer and Documate. I do use Trello with my team. And Trello allows us to manage our tasks and actually have them repeat. So we build a ton of checklists and we check them off weekly by, we can all see what's left. I could tell you right now what was left on deck for tomorrow before we finish out our week using Trello, and my team's kind of all over. We use Slack to communicate, Office 365 for all that good stuff. And then we use Case Mail for mailing, although there's also something called EDEXIS, and that's in the chat. Cheaper than Case Mail per piece, but this allows you to upload your documents and they will physically mail them for you. It's a really great tool if you're looking to mail, even if you need certified mail return receipt. Although there's a new one on the in the world called Certificate of Service, I think. I'm still kind of vetting that one. We use Earth Class Mail, and that's how we receive mail. So it's a dedicated group that scan in all our mail and deposit our checks. And then I don't know, there's a whole bunch more, I'm sure. But
well, I do want to answer Holly's specific question about the signatures. And I'll say this, and this may not be a fun answer, but a lot of it is very specific on what you're doing and what state you're in. So for example, Texas will not allow you to e-sign estate documents. You're just not allowed to do it. There's a lot of talk about maybe updating that and changing that, but for right now, you got to have wet signatures. A law professor I know was closing on a refinance, and they had to go to the office and sign in the middle of this shutdown and go sign wet documents because that was still required. If you're able to use electronic signatures, which is a huge if, then really DocuSign is the easiest to go implement. It's really set up to be easy. And I think, Preston, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're at the top of the hour. We were set for an hour, right? I don't want us to become one of those super long meetings. That could have been an email, but.
Yeah, we are at time. Mike, I don't know if you have any closing remarks. I'll do the housekeeping items, but feel free to close us out, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to thank John and Megan and Lori. It was really helpful to have this conversation, and with all of us, there has to be more, right? We're going to have to keep talking through this. I don't know that if each of you want to just tell us the easiest way to get to you. On Twitter, I'm at Mike Whalen Jr. And then that's probably the easiest place to get me. What about you guys, if people want to follow up with you?
I want to ask a question. This is a closed group, I'm assuming, right? This is just the legal industry here?
It is.
So I have a Slack resources for legal group that's full of all kinds of cool information and tools and people.
Cool.
I'm going to share the link in the chat. It's an open invite. We just ask that you don't share it on social media because we don't want everyone else to we're trying to keep it specific for the legal field. I'm also on Twitter at Raynacorp, RAYNACORP, or you can find me in Slack.
And I'm on Twitter too,
that
at
link
Xavier
went
Law.
to, hey, Lori, that link
one.
you just sent went to Acuity.
Ignore that
sorry,
one.
Megan, you're Xavier Law, you said for
Okay,
Twitter?
yeah, Twitter, at Xavier Law.
What about you, John?
John Tobin, LA, that's on Twitter, and then counselforcreators.com.
And then the last thing I just wanted to let you know is we had mentioned before talking about getting to the next thing, right? So we're triage getting online, but we need to have a conversation about business model redesign. Do I change practice areas? Do I create new products? How do I work with other people in innovative ways? We've got to sort of change the way we do legal delivery. So I'm hosting a conference. It's called Lawyer Forward. We did a live version for 5 years, but it's going to be virtual this year. And it's just at lawyerforward.com/virtual. It's a pay what you can model. Contribute if you want. If not, just attend and let's chat. So go to lawyerforward.com/virtual and we'll follow up on the chat. Thanks to Preston. Thanks to everybody for having us. And we look forward to chatting with you again around this. Preston, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, John, Megan, Lori. Awesome. To the Law Insider community, we will send a recording. I'll put together a recap. There's some great links in here. So by tomorrow, you'll have in your inbox resources from today as well as the recording. And we're going to be doing more. So I mentioned we're partnering with Mike now. So you're going to see more content like this and adjacent topics to help you manage your practice better. That's it. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. On behalf of the Law Insider, we'll see you next time.
Stay healthy, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.